Is making a small video game bad? This is a post that is a question posted by Code Monkey on his community tab, and he explains why it's actually not as bad as you think. And we're gonna go over that post today. So let's get started with who is Code Monkey. Code Monkey is a YouTuber who specializes in game development through the use of accessible free courses on making a game on several categories, including shooters, role playing games, and others on Unity. He is the winner of the 16th Unity Awards for Best Tutorial Series, and he uses YouTube as a platform to showcase what assets and systems are on sale for game developers on Unity. So basically, he puts out a video whenever there's a sale and puts them all in there, whatever is on sale for the week. For example, Publisher of the Week or assets that are on sale, like 30% off, those type of things. So let's go over the post now. And the post is actually in this community tab if you guys want to check it out. And my community tab because I shared it. Small games, part one, small games. Small games equal faster learning. He mentions that you can make four small games or one major game, which is a large game. He mentions that you can learn more in a small game than a large game. And here's my takeaway on that. And I agree with him on this. Because if you make a small game and take your time with them, you get to absorb more information and learn each small thing at your own pace. You can use each thing eventually from what you learn and put them into a large project. Making one big game off the rip forces you to learn far more in a larger amount of time, and there's plenty to take in. Why is this a bad thing? If you're trying to make a big game right off the rip, like right away, you have to learn a lot of mechanics in one thing. Now, if it's on one topic, that's probably a different story. But if you introduce this mechanic, if you introduce this mechanic, then you have to make sure this mechanic works on this and they're linked together, and you'll find out why in a moment in a few slides. His personal journey. Each one taught me something new, he says. Unintentionally, he followed his own advice. In 5 years, he made 40 games, Flash games. And if you calculate the math, that's 8 games a year. Each one taught me something new, he says. Made different genres like shooters, RPGs, and those tower defense. And here are my takeaways from this section. Smaller games might mean not as much revenue, but you will finish more small games than a big game. Have you seen a lot of people burn out and not complete a game that they're developing? It's because the scale of their game is too large. That's why most of the time when you see I am counseling game development, it's most likely because of burnout. Okay? And why is the burnout? Now, don't we're gonna say that yes, there is burnout in small games, but it's much less, and we'll talk about that later. Um, why is there burnout in large games? Because now you have to think about this mechanic, that mechanic. Does this work? Does that work? Do I want this idea? Do I not want this idea? Like this mechanic or that system or that platform. In small games, it's not as much. Making small games means less stress and less burnout. Making a big project leads to burnout faster. True. It is still possible to burn out for small games, but it's far less and it's manageable. There's a little break here and there and you'll be good. But if you take a big break from a big game, then you tend to forget what did you do, what what's this mechanic for, unless you wrote it all down. Part 3, experience is key. Piggybacking off the last point about small games, he mentions not just Flappy Bird clones, that's his quote. He made a complex game which is called Dinky Guardians, Dinky, in about 6 months using the experience he had with all of the smaller games he made already. So he took all those small games he made, even though they were small, not gonna make money, maybe not. He put all of those mechanics in this big boy, Dinky Guardian. Okay? So he combined everything that he learned from those small games and in 6 months made a big game or medium game, if you will, or something in that sort. It's on Steam now for 15 US dollars. And your speed of the game you are making is going to scale with the skills you have learned. So this is why you you start small. Because if you learn, oh, platforming, that's cool. I like that. And then you learn about weapons in a platforming game. Oh yeah, that's cool too. I want that. And then you combine them together in a game for you to learn. That's why there's templates for you on Steam to try to start learning from that template. So you can use the template as a base to learn how to make your own game like that. Number 4, part 4, risk taking. Small games reduce risk. If you have a big game, you're taking a major big risk. If you have a big game, you are one shot at success. But with small games, you have more chances to be successful. And the success of games nowadays, according to Code Monkey, is based on a idea, not on content inside of the game. And I'm going to establish why. I'm going to talk about why in a moment. Let me take my takeaways. Many people who want to be indie devs to many people want to be indie devs to be the next COD killer, Call of Duty killer, COD, something like that, or the next Skyrim if you guys are into that. But these games are already established to the point where you cannot compete with them. It's better to attempt to be original than just I want to be COD. Have you seen people, um, developers, trying to be Call of Duty killer? This is gonna be the next Call of Duty. This is gonna be the next Skyrim, or this is the next Mario or whatever. Now the Mario example, I kind of agree with. I don't agree with, but the Call of Duty yet one, yes, a lot of people want to be the next COD or the next Skyrim, especially because the FPS category nowadays is so saturated. But here's the thing about that. It's already super saturated to where the competition is high, and even if you get a good game, it's going to be paled in comparison to Call of Duty because they are already established. Okay? Now, better to be original. This is not as easy as it looks because there's a lot of games out there, and there's a lot of reason why a lot of Steam games are indie games now. There's a lot of indie games on Steam. There's more indie games on itch.io as well as a Game Jolt, but that's because that's where they are. Okay? Now, will every game hit? No. Not all games will hit, but you will have more chances to be successful with a small game than doing a big game. Because one mistake in a big game and it's all over. A mistake in a small game, not as bad. Because it's a small game. You're not you're learning something. You're learning about this mechanic. You're learning about that. It's a small game. Small mistake, small game. One small mistake in a big game though, yeah. Good luck fixing it. Number 5. Speaking of small, big, the scale. What is the scale of your game? Focus on the core experience he mentioned. And he talks about dream games as well. Is a dream game the one you are making a GTA style game? Scale it down to small missions and less content. Because Grand Theft Auto 5 or any Grand Theft Auto game, including the upcoming GTA 6, is going to be a major game. It's a big game. It's a city. It's a major city, fictional, of course, and there's a lot of missions. And then you have to connect those missions together because they form a story. Okay, because Grand Theft Auto, yes, it's an open world game, but the missions you play in Grand Theft Auto are actually a story. They're a story that connects from A to B to C to D, and depending on the characters you meet, those branch out to other small stories based on the missions you complete. If you're trying to make something like that and you want to learn how to do it yourself, I would he says make it small, small missions, less content. Yes, it's not gonna be as big as Grand Theft Auto, but at least you get to learn how to do it. Is the dream like a Skyrim game? You want to have a small world with small missions and not too many characters. That's the key, he says. Indie devs cannot compete with AAA companies. There is absolutely no way. Maybe 0.001%, but there is no way to compete with AAA companies. No way. And don't be afraid of updates, he says. Extend the game with sequels and updates. So here are my takeaways from this section. The scale of your game will determine how much work and effort you put into your game. If it's too big, you will burn out quickly. Being the next COD or Skyrim is not the way to go. It's a great dream, don't get me wrong. But as an indie dev starting out, you need to start small, small enough to be a game, but enough content to be a game. Okay? And finally, for this section, don't be afraid of updates. Update your game when you have something. Don't just force the update on let's say January 19, 2027. Now, if you mention a date, everybody's going to be expecting of you to make an update on that date. But as an indie dev, don't worry about guidelines. I mean, guidelines, sure, but don't be worried about a fixed release date for an update. As an indie dev, you are your own boss. You don't have to worry about CEO or boss this, boss B, or boss C. You are your own boss, an indie game boss. You do you your own pace, your own game. You update when you want to, but don't forget to update when you need to. That's what I'm saying here. Are you doing this for a job or are you trying to learn for fun? That's what he says. Here, games for fun or professional. If you're doing for fun and you just want to learn about this system, that system, go nuts, go no rules, go ham. But if you're trying to do it to earn revenue, you want to start small. He says to start small, learn fast, make more games. It's very straightforward. That's why I said straightforward for takeaways. Now I want to talk about my takeaways generally. This is why I learned from reading this. Okay? The risk reward aspect of game development is night and day. Small games have small risk, while big games have massive risk. And in some cases, in major cases, it's one shot. It's one shot to make a good impression. Management of a small game is better than doing it on a lot in a large game. For small games, it's possibly a few mechanics to implement, depending on what your game is. And one thing breaking here and there is not automatic failure. No way. Because it's easier to fix one thing in a small game if you know what you're doing than it is a large game. Because now, in a large game, you have to make sure every mechanic is in sync with each other. Otherwise, if one thing fails, it goes down. You cannot it's you cannot um if you cannot detect the problem in the large game because it's too big, there's your problem right there. It's a large scale game. That's why we talked about the scale factor. You will learn a lot more making a small game than a big game. In a small game, you can learn each mechanic or system without the most of the fears of making sure everything is right. You also can use what you learn in a small game in a big game environment. Making a big game off the rip leads more mistakes, errors, or crashes. And the worst thing is crashes. Yeah, you don't want that. Let me tell you about personal experience. The card game I'm making, Yuki's Mini Tower, on the game development channel. I have not made a video for that since. And there's a good reason why, other than the holidays and me being back on as a content creator streamer. I'm taking my time and making sure all the cards, costs, and other stuff make sense before releasing a build. That's why it's taking a while to make a new build. The next build is going to add elements. It's called the element update. Fire, wind, ice, etc. And I have to make sure everything balances out one step at a time. For example, if I'm going to play a fire card that deals 10 damage plus every mana card you played, I have to make sure there's a counter to that on the enemy side just in case. Because that can be overpowering very fast. But what if, for some reason, I decided to make a card for the enemy? The enemy can take away 2 fire mana or something fire related and reduce the damage taken. That's my way of saying I'm going to balance yours, you and I together to make sure everything is balanced out. To make sure that the hero characters are not overpowered. At the same time, I'm making sure the enemy is not overpowered or overpowering by making sure their cards or their skills are not overpowering at the same time. That's what I'm saying here. But don't just take what Code Monkey is saying here just for game development. It's also for VR chat world development as well, like I do. How do I know this? I'm making another VR chat world. I've been making Yuki's Quitter Den, the one for D&D, and it looks big, but it's small. Why? Because the main mechanic in the Critter Den is not the world itself. It's the Dungeons and Dragons slash tabletop role playing game aspect. There's a table. You have dice. You have a dice in the corner just in case you need some, and you just roll the dice. Done. That's all you need. You need a dice spawner, and that's all you need. How do I learn this? How do I learn how to do this? Because I've been taking it one step at a time. I'm learning how to do the dice spawner. Now, obviously, I use assets from other people, but even if you do that, you have to put it together yourself. If you buy an asset from somebody um, in Unity, they're not making the world for you. Yes, you're using their assets, but they're not building the world for you. You are building the world yourself. The responsibility of the person you buy from the asset pack is to provide the asset pack. The responsibility of you as a world developer is to make the world using that asset pack. How you build it together is up to you. But what I'm saying here, the takeaway here is start small. Don't jump into VR chat world development and make the next Grand Theft Auto. That's not gonna work. Although there is one world in there that you can actually do that. Just take it slow, have some fun, learn along the way, and voila, you're going to have a good world. So, the question of the day: do you agree with Mr. Code Monkey about what he's saying about making small games? Comment below in this video, and I'll see your responses. And for the most part, I'm going to tell you, I agree. I actually agree with him for the most part. So we'll see you for our next commentary tomorrow. Gaming news returns, and we're going to be talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. And then for our next commentary, we'll talk about more game development stuff. We'll see what we have. That's all for now. Enjoy, and we'll see you guys another time in our next commentary. So all I have to say to you is get on game development thing, I guess. Enjoy.